You either start with an uncomfortable conversation or you'll end with one.
That's right. It's almost like a prenup, right? No one likes to talk about it when they're about to get married, but it's best that conversation is had because, at the end of the day, 50% of marriages fail.
People don't realize if you hire cheap talent or inexperienced talent, how expensive that actually is. And some of the cheapest things he's done is hire top performers.
No one cares. No one cares about you. And this is liberating and empowering because when you face that, people only care about themselves. People are too worried about appearances or a particular decision you're going to make. People really don't care. They care more about themselves. So empower yourself and do what you need to do and don't worry about what other people think.
Santiago Cueto joins me here tonight, and you can learn what his team is up to by going to callsantiago.com. I'm going to have that as a clickable link in the show notes. But we're going to be talking about legal type stuff here tonight. This should be a great conversation. I've been really looking forward to this. Santiago has a best-selling book on Amazon that everybody should check out as well. You were a top seller in a number of categories, so it's quite the impressive.
I was.
So, can you start by telling the story of how you transitioned from standard law, specializing in business, and then to real estate law?
Well, I'm based here in Miami, and as anybody who's read the papers in the past couple of years, Miami has been a boom town especially for luxury properties and commercial spaces. A lot of people during COVID migrated here, and not only for the weather, because it's a tax-friendly environment, business-friendly environment. Florida has the welcome sign open for everybody. And so people have taken advantage of that and are still coming down. If you look around my office, you're going to see, I think in a 360-degree view, cranes everywhere. It's still boomtown. There's still a lot of opportunities for investors. And so I became involved naturally by I'm a business attorney. I'm board certified in international law. And that really resulted in a lot of international investors reaching out to me. Hey, Santiago, do you know anything going on? And can you help us navigate the real estate space there in Miami? High-end luxury homes, commercial real estate, you name it, they've got their eyes on it.
Could you talk a little bit about what is one critical mistake you've seen real estate investors make that we can try to avoid?
Okay, well, there's a couple. Choosing the right partner. On a joint venture or partnership, a lot of people are just looking in for a quick buck, just going in and out without really knowing who they're getting involved with. A lot of people come down here are not native to this market. They'll come down here, put together a syndicate group to purchase real estate. And, when the money starts coming in, that's when the problems start. So I would say number one, vet your partners and your joint venture partners and really be careful who you get involved with. And number two, and it's very simple, but people don't learn, is to read all the agreements and the contracts. What I do, I flip to the back. There's a lot of these arbitration clauses. There's a lot of jurisdictional clauses. There's acceleration clauses that my clients aren't aware of. Due diligence is probably the third one in terms of making sure that you can build where you want to build. You got to take into zoning. If you need a variance, you got to go for variance. There's no liens on the properties. So those are the top three.
It's kind of interesting you bring up partnerships because it's something that I've mentioned a few times is the concept that you either start with an uncomfortable conversation or you'll end with one.
That's right. It's almost like a prenup, right? No one likes to talk about it when they're about to get married, but it's best that conversation is had because, at the end of the day, 50% of marriages fail. And so 50% of people are going to be very disappointed to learn that. So it's best to have that conversation up front. In terms of even exit strategies or if things go sideways, who's responsible? What are the duties and obligations of each party? Just a clear understanding of what's going on. And if there is a dispute, preferably have a cascading dispute resolution clause in there. Instead of just running to court or running to arbitration, you include in the contract a provision that says, well, first, if there's a dispute, let's try in good faith to talk about it and settle it informally. If that doesn't work, let's try mediation. And let's do that for 30 days. If mediation doesn't work, well, only then can you go to arbitration or court. Now, I always say go to arbitration. It's much faster and it's confidential.
That's really good advice. I would imagine that's often missed.
It is. People are so quick to sign up agreements and they just skip over the parts that they really need to look at. And those are pretty easy to find. They're usually the boilerplate language in the back. It's not complicated, but they do need to look at it. And, I've got a couple of cases where somebody agreed to dispute in New York if there was a dispute and they couldn't believe it. Now they have to fly to New York, participate in proceedings in New York, only because they didn't negotiate having jurisdictional clause in Florida or in Miami or in a place that's nice to go in the winter. If you're going to be disputing in the winter, you don't want to be in New York. You want it, if you're from Florida, I always advocate to have it near turf. Don't let the other side have you go in their turf. So that's what I advise my clients.
Do you see a number of people, you mentioned boilerplate. Do you see a number of people who just kind of rely on things they find on the internet and hope for the best?
They do. And I can tell right away. These days, I think we're all familiar with ChatGPT and what it looks like, if somebody used it. And that's very apparent. And that's always a big mistake, is to go use ChatGPT or to use, one of these downloadable online forms. First of all, you shouldn't download anything from the internet. You could get a virus at minimum. You want to protect your IT infrastructure against any cybersecurity attacks. The best way to do is not download anything. And the investment on an attorney, it's really not that much considering what's at stake. Put in the time and the effort to consult with an attorney or a legal professional to walk you through it. For you to go, in the end, a free contract is more expensive than hiring an attorney. And we probably all know scenarios where, I should have used an attorney to do something because it ended up sometimes in multi-million-dollar judgments against them because they just put together this franking contract. Well, they'll pull multiple agreements from different websites, create one uniform agreement, and have the party sign it. And when I come across it, who drafted this? Because it's not good. And I got to go in and prepare the clients for the bad news when something doesn't go their way. So the best thing you could do is always consult a professional.
I would also imagine that you see a number of situations where you have small investors. Is there anything that a person can do to outsmart the competition in that regards or be in a better position?
Well, again, it's, read the fine print of a contract. These boilerplates that these, bigger partners, they just assume everything is correct. You'd be surprised how many times we poured over these bigger contracts and we found a loophole that, the big shot attorneys assume that the contract is airtight. But guess what? Laws change. And those contracts fail to move with it. So we're able to give it a close look and sometimes capture something that doesn't apply anymore to my client's benefit. In other words, sometimes they're too big and we use that to our advantage. We're faster, we're more flexible and nimble. We don't just assume that the contract, because it's been in some kind of legal vault in a boilerplate room, that it's still good law.
So let's go back to like the newer investor. Like for a new investor tuning in, what is an actionable first step you'd recommend? Something that they can do this week to safeguard their interests?
I would say due diligence. A quick Google search will pick up lawsuits, check the court records in the county that the property is located, do a property search here in Miami-Dade County. We have a very user-friendly Miami-Dade property appraiser's website where you literally plug in the address that you're interested in, and it will flag anything. You cross-reference that with a free search on the court websites. Again, all free to the public. You need to know whether there was lawsuits, and there's a lot of lawsuits. We do a lot of particularly construction litigation where a lot of these properties are tied up with construction liens.
I actually even recommend people who are doing their self-landlording, doing a Google search on that individual you're about to rent to. Sometimes will pop something up that you didn't see from the reports you get.
Sometimes they'll set up a website and make it look like that company's been around for a long time. But if you do a who is search on the internet, you can see that domain name was just registered months ago. That's a huge red flag. And you can quickly verify that by going to the domain registry and searching the domain name that they're purporting to be part of. It's common that you'll see some of these companies that said, we have 30 years experience. And that company just registered the domain name in February of this past year.
Oh, for some reason, when you said that, I was thinking of Vandalay Industries from Seinfeld.
That's right. and into the phone. That's true too. That's modern day version of it. Yeah, we don't know what Costanza, what he's up to, but that's something definitely he would try to do, but we could quickly outsmart him by using the tools that are there for free and just doing basic due diligence. We just recovered a couple $1 million on behalf of a government that did business, their sovereign fund did business with somebody who their storefront here in Miami was a travel agency that has nothing to do with the business that they were in. It was really, it might as well have been a P.O. box. It would have been more believable. But we went and did a Google Earth search, Google Map search, and we showed up in person. And it was this old rundown travel agency. So we were very quickly able to determine that that was a front.
Does that happen quite often?
Thankfully not. But, every day here, you have a few surprises where you just can't believe people are still up to fraud, and unfortunately, Florida is a fraud capital of the United States. As they say, it's the joke amongst our attorneys here, it's a sunny place for shady people. So you have to be extra careful.
So you kind of mentioned the perils of using ChatGPT and downloading files from the internet, but are there any tools that you would suggest people maybe check out or leverage?
I don't feel confident enough to say that there's something reliable out there. Not yet. I know that AI is making incredible inroads, but as we know and read in the papers, even judges are scolding attorneys for hallucinated sites in their briefs. And I can't believe it's still going on, but it's still a very big problem with various bars around the United States. We're very reputable attorneys and their law firms continue to use ChatGPT despite the widespread publicity of how ChatGPT or any of these AI tools still have the tendency to hallucinate. So I can't say with 100% certainty, there still isn't a tool out there that I feel completely comfortable with. It can help you, maybe put you in the right direction. I fall back to my previous discussion on it's always less expensive to just hire an attorney.
Well, I think we're seeing, now you're kind of going in my wheelhouse a little bit. We're seeing a lot of people who will just blindly trust these tools where they should probably be used more as a tool. We still have that human aspect to double check, make sure it might help you with some tedious tasks, but in the end, we're the ones who have to do the fact checking here.
Absolutely. There are tools like word processing for writers before, writers had typewriters. Well, there's a tool that came out called the word processor, and that helped expedite the writing, but the word processor didn't do the writing for them. And certainly ChatGPT can kind of help the process of writing by giving you suggestions for ideas, but you still need to write. And we all know these days, by having gone through ChatGPT generated material, what's generated most likely with ChatGPT and what's not. What's missing in the ChatGPT version is that authentic voice. It's hard to pin down, but we know it when we see it.
Just to remind everybody, we are talking to Santiago Cueto. You can learn more at callsantiago.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. If you found some value in what we're talking about so far, this show only grows if you share it with another investor. So please consider doing that. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. Santiago, could you share a dark moment in your real law career and what you learned from it and how it shaped your career going forward?
Sure. And this is in my book, I think, and I mention it because it's very important that clients are honest with you about everything. If there's a piece of real estate that's got a lien on it, we need to know that there's a lien on it. Or if there's some environmental issues, you need to tell us about that. Because guess what? The other side's going to tell us, but we're not going to be happy when we find out. And why I say that, because it helps us anticipate and defend around it. If we find out later, when the deal's being signed, that, hey, there's a problem, we can't close because of this undisclosed issue, I've turned to my client and said, you didn't tell me about this. And there's nothing more infuriating and disappointing, frankly, when the client wasn't upfront. When a client shares information with me, it stays with me forever with the attorney-client privilege. But it helps me help them. So I tell them, tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's only going to help you. Do not hold back.
So what happened in that situation?
The deal did not close. And had he told me the truth, had we addressed it early on, we would have approached the sellers and buyers and said, hey, we've got this issue. What can we do about it? Or will you give us some more time to resolve it? People usually will say, of course we will. But what they don't like is at the last minute, find out something that should have been told beforehand. Sometimes I think in this case, it was almost like a year before. And, they really should have shared that.
Well, let's look on the brighter side of things. Could you share an example or a story of somebody that you saved likely jail time or worse?
Well, the client was honest with me. I have a great story where the client was honest with me, and it was a wealthy client. I'm trying to maintain anonymity as best I can. The story's in the book. Despite her wealth, I guess it's the thrill of the moment, shoplifted some minor item at a retail store. She told me up front, and we were on a multi-million-dollar breach of contract case that she filed. Before the other side can dare to impugn her character based on that, she told me, and we were prepared for it. And we were able to file what's called the motion in limine. That means, hey, court, we think this evidence is irrelevant to the case. It shouldn't be brought in. This other matter is completely different. They're just trying to make her look bad. She had a bad moment. The charges were dropped, by the way. But they still would have, had she not told me, we would not have been prepared, they were prepared to bring it in.
You're back. Yeah, sorry about that. It looked like you disconnected there for a second. So we were just talking about, thankfully, those charges were dropped.
Right.
So let's get real on something. What is one of those mainstream legal advices you hear that just makes you cringe every time you hear it?
Oh, Daddy. Oh, it's easy. Don't worry. Don't worry about it. I always worry about it. It's my job to worry. So, don't worry. I got it taken care of. Be careful around anybody who tells you that. There's always surprises. No deal is completely smooth. There's always some gray areas. Just always be cautious of anybody who tells you, don't worry about it. Not a problem.
So, Santiago, it's obvious that you are in your legal practice, you're operating at a high level. And you must have an ironclad mindset. You said you're constantly worrying, in a state of worry. How do you keep that under control, and how do you maintain your mindset to maintain your top performer status?
We have a great team here. They do a lot of work behind the scenes to make me look good. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my team. So it's good to delegate to people who are smarter than you.
How do you identify those smarter people?
Well, it's the little things. They go the extra mile. They don't only just do the task. Hey, you may have not considered this, but how about this? Instead of just taking instructions from me, and I'm like, that's a great idea. Let's do it. Those who go the extra mile and go beyond just following instructions and really want to help the team, even if it means that calling me out on something that could have been done better. By all means, that's why you're here. To make us all better as a team. And they know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I listened to a lot of Alex Hormozy lately, and he mentioned something about people don't realize if you hire cheap talent or inexperienced talent, how expensive that actually is. And some of the cheapest things he's done is hire top performers.
That's a great point. And same thing with getting a contract for the internet. You're way better investing in something that's top quality, top notch.
Well, for people who are struggling with the concept of investing in a good relationship with a lawyer, what would you tell them, like, regarding that? We just talked about hiring top talent, but sometimes people really have a hard time seeing this type of relationship as an investment versus an expense.
You mean, how do I tell my clients?
Yeah.
Well, I tell them, they're delivering their best work. You got a top-notch team. I happen to be board certified in international law here in Florida. There's only about 50 attorneys who specialize in law. To get that, you have to go a little bit above and beyond. And I try to identify those who've gone above and beyond, not just to get their degree, but they continue to educate themselves after they've got their degree. They continue to learn and take classes and educate themselves because learning never stops.
Do you find that there's any kind of common strategy or real estate myth, like waiting to get sued before you taking legal action, that you believe is overrated?
Yeah, no, we always like to be very aggressive in terms of there's a potential lawsuit. We tend to be the first ones to file. As I tell my clients, it's always better to be on top of the V than below the V. No one likes to be a defendant in a lawsuit. I'd rather be the plaintiff initiating a lawsuit. If they want a counterclaim, that's fine. They're the defendant counter plaintiff. But just optically from a complaint, no one likes to be the one being sued first. And number two, you have so much more leverage when you're the first one to take action. You call their bluff, and now you're in a much better position to leverage negotiations in your favor.
Usually just anybody and everyone would typically try to avoid that scenario, but you're there strategically. Sometimes that's the best course of action.
Not every time, but sometimes it is, especially we get wind, just today in our office, a client told us, we'll just wait for them to come after us and sue because this person defaulted on a promissory note involving some complex real estate. And in that case, he's like, buy some time. Let them come after me because on the defense side, sometimes time is your best friend. So there's no doubt with all this money at stake that they'll come knocking very soon. But he knows that you can leverage litigation to slow things down considerably and to leverage it rather than going straight into offering them a settlement. Making them go through litigation sometimes is actually from a position of strength.
So are there any prevalent industry practices or government regulations in real estate that you believe should be questioned or revamped?
We've had, in terms of condo and high-end condo properties here, there's been a lot of reform in terms of the HOAs and the financing of these condominiums, which is, it's really led to a lot of problems where the legislators had to kind of amend the statute that was amended in wake of the Surfside collapse here in, I think it was 2022. A lot of changes were made. So we're still trying to keep up with all the changes. So I would say first, make sure that, your condo owners, particularly if you go to a high-end situation, that the HOA is properly financed and it's complying with all the current law. Again, it changes very fast.
Yeah. I just have talked to a number of real estate wholesalers, for example, and across the country right now, depending on the state, the laws associated with that are changing on a pretty regular basis. It's hard to, and it's not one of those things that gets publicized. So you might be in breach of something without even realizing it.
That's true. I think July 1st, about a month ago, there was a bunch of more changes and amendments that took place. The state of Florida does its best to educate the public, but the public generally doesn't go searching for new statutes and updates. I think it's incumbent for us legal professionals to educate the public what the latest changes are.
So have you seen any recent trend in real estate investing that you think most newcomers should just steer clear from?
Well, there's a lot of what's called infill. Miami-Dade, every square inch is basically taken. So a lot of these developers are going for existing buildings and trying to buy out condos and apartments and things like that. And that's ruffling a couple feathers in terms of, you don't want to create a reputation of being the bad guy coming in and throwing a bunch of good people out without proper notice, of course. So that's, I would avoid, coming in, taking them, buying out all the residents and not, giving them, a reasonable amount of time to look for alternative arrangements. There are holdouts, of course, but at the end of the day, the developers kind of went out and, in the process, they don't mate for the best neighbors when they're entering a new vicinity. So I'd say exercise good bedside manners when you're entering, particularly a foreign investor that's new to the market. Don't just come in there and buy out the properties and kick them all out. Go in there with a reasonable timeline to give the residents of particular buildings some time to adjust and hear you out and, maybe tone down the rhetoric and the aggressiveness in acquiring these infill properties.
On the flip side, I'd be curious, you have a different vantage point when it comes to the real estate investing market. Is there anything that you see that people should maybe be taking advantage of?
Well,
There's an opportunity.
For sure. Now, if you look at Zillow with residential properties here in Miami, it's just everything's overlapping each other. It looks like air traffic control. Have you ever seen these maps of airplanes flying over the country? It's hard to see the land below. That's similar with what's going on in Miami. There are so many houses on the market right now. It's unprecedented. And I really think it's an opportunity for buyers.
So where do you see the future hold, especially in your backyard? Like any legal strategies or any changes on the horizon, maybe the economy?
Well, a big one being proposed by Governor DeSantis is getting rid of property tax. His argument is we own the land free and clear. like we paid off the mortgage. Why every year are we basically paying a lease to the government in the form of property taxes when it's paid off? And I know that gets into political grounds, which I'm not going to talk about here, but that's on the radar here. And a lot of people are excited about it.
That's something that's been a hot topic in my state as well, as the concept that, especially at a certain age, you've retired, you got everything paid off, you're on Medicare, Medicaid, and everything else, but they can still lose their homes because they're behind on their property taxes.
Yeah. And it makes sense. I know there's more behind it. It's more than just a simple concept. But when you put it in those terms, especially retired folk and people living on a very limited means, it makes sense. Maybe over a certain age or something, but I know that we get into anti-discrimination or reverse discrimination for younger people who have to pay property taxes. So I'm not going to wade into that. But it's an interesting idea nonetheless.
So, Santiago, this has just been such a fantastic conversation. Before we jump into the rapid fire and close out this episode, is there anything else we should have tried to hit on?
Well, there's so much going on, particularly, in Miami. I guess the name of the game now, a lot of houses and high-end real estate, they're being raised. So now with the government passes the Live Local Act, making way for affordable housing. So we see a lot of developers moving into areas that were undevelopable before. And now we're seeing a lot of movement thanks to the Live Local Act passed by the state of Florida recently.
So that live local, is because there's a lot of out of state buying, or what was the reason behind it?
It's just very, very difficult for first-time buyers in Miami to afford basic housing. It's really got through the roof, even the quote affordable units. But, it's a move in the right direction to get people, particularly young families, to get them into their, situated American dream, which is increasingly more difficult to come by, particularly here in my corner of Florida.
Right. Well, now we're going to spill the beans on when we're recording this, but I mean, we saw the Fed just today again announce they're holding. I thought most people were expecting or hoping for a drop in interest, but that just didn't come.
They're not budging.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that. Well, if you're ready, Santiago, we'll jump into the rapid fire and close out this episode. First, what lie do real estate investors often tell themselves?
That it's a good deal.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
No one cares. No one cares about you. And this is liberating and empowering, because when you face that, people only care about themselves. People are too worried about appearances or a particular decision you're going to make. People really don't care. They care more about themselves. So empower yourself and do what you need to do, and don't worry about what other people think.
That's really profound. I struggle with that myself because I'm just in a constant state of you're concerned that the way people might see you or perceive you.
It's incredibly liberating once you really follow your own path without being judged by others. It's actually good advice. It may sound like a downer, but it's incredibly liberating once you grasp it.
So, well, I'm going to ask for a book recommendation, but I'm going to also recommend your book. So everybody head over to Amazon for Santiago's Winning Lawsuits in Florida. Do you have a book recommendation?
Well, you can see in back of me, I have a bunch of books. One particular book is the Walt Disney biography. I just think across industries, he's really changed the world and brought happiness to countless families. He was all about making people happy in the simplest of ways and bringing families together. And I just love that part of him. And in doing that, he became one of the greatest business people we've ever known in this country. Just simply wanted to make people happy.
And finally, what single process or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time-saving impact?
Well, I was against it, but ChatGPT, used correctly, can be a very useful tool for quick searches and things. Of course, we always validate it and do further search. But to get you on your way, I think it would be irresponsible of me to say that it's not useful.
Well, I've used it to ask questions of the documents I'm looking at.
You can even create podcasts of them.
Yeah. So, it's just really like Otherwise, some of that, the legalese can get, and unless you have Santiago in the corner and I can call you up any moment of the day, this is a good way to get a high level idea. I really appreciate your time, Santiago. Again, I am going to call Santiago.com for more information and really appreciate your time. This was great to meet you.
Thank you, Jack. I'm thrilled to be here.